Hey guys, we are on Unit 11, Day 9, and we're going to talk about the reciprocal trig functions. So just when you thought there was only 3, there's actually 3 more if you flip all of our current 3, because a flipping of a fraction is called a reciprocal. All right, so it says now we have seen 3 primary trigonometric functions, the sine, cosine, and tangent functions. Each of these can be identified in terms of either ratios of the sides of a right triangle or as coordinates that lie on the unit circle. For each of these functions, though, there exists what is known as a reciprocal function. Their definitions are shown below. Okay. So it says that the reciprocal of cosine theta, which equals adjacent over hypotenuse, is secant theta. Okay, so we have to connect that secant theta is the reciprocal of cosine theta. Okay, they're going to abbreviate it SEC, so secant theta. Which is they're going to equal your hypotenuse side on top and your adjacent side on the bottom. Or we can also do 1 over cosine theta. All right. So if you do 1 over cosine theta, that is a way of flipping a fraction. For instance, if I have the fraction 3/4 and I want to flip it in my calculator, obviously I can flip it and get 4/3, all right, by hand. Or I can do 1 over 3/4. And when I do 1 divided by 3/4 in my calculator and math bracket, it comes out to equal 4/3. All right, so I can either flip it by hand, all right, or I can do 1 divided by our fraction and it will flip it for me in the calculator. All right, and why that works, guys, is keep, change, flip. So if I keep the 1, I change this division to multiplication and I flip my 3/4 to 4/3. Okay, 1 times 4/3 is 4/3, and this is why 1 over the fraction will flip it. Okay, all right, next one up, we have sine theta, which we know is your opposite side over your hypotenuse side, and the reciprocal of sine theta is what they call cosecant theta, and they're going to abbreviate it CSC. That says cosecant theta. All right, so a little bit of a different abbreviation there. Okay. And that's going to equal my hypotenuse side on top and my opposite side on the bottom, or I could do 1 over sine theta. All right, and here's how I keep these straight, that if this begins cosine with a C, its reciprocal actually begins with an S. Okay, that sine begins with an S and its reciprocal begins with a C. So just remember that the 2 C's don't go together. Okay, that C goes with an S and an S goes with a C. Hopefully that'll help. Next one's a little bit easier to remember. Okay, tangent theta. Okay, tangent is your opposite side over your adjacent side. And the reciprocal of tangent is cotangent, which is abbreviated COT. Okay, and then that cotangent theta would be your adjacent side on top, your opposite side on the bottom, or 1 over tangent theta is how we know cotangent, okay, which is the reciprocal. So a little bit tricky. And then if that's not all, this is also a little bit tricky. Remember, tangent theta could also equal sine theta over cosine theta, right? Where you tan, Southern California. Therefore, if we flip that, cotangent theta can also be known as cosine theta over sine theta. All right, so for this one, I remember that where we tan in Southern California, a cot is what you catch sleep on. So who knows what helps you remember those, okay? But memorizing them is important, okay? Will help you do these questions a little bit easier. Okay? All right, guys, number 1, it says evaluate each of the following, express your answers in exact and simplest form. So we have secant 60. It'd be awesome if we had a secant button on our calculator. We would press it, type in 60, and hit enter. But we do not have a secant button on our calculator. We only have our 3 trig functions. And so we have to remember that secant of 60 is also going to be known as 1 over the cosine of 60 degrees. Okay, so secant is the reciprocal of cosine. And so this is how we're going to go ahead and type it in. All right, so 1 divided by cosine of 60 might not come out, although this one will. All right, so if you type in 1 divided by cosine of 60 and hit enter, you're going to end up with the answer of 2. Sometimes that won't come out extremely nice. You guys will be able to see in a couple of the examples down the road. Another way you guys could do it is if it doesn't come out to be our answer of 2 right away, you could type in just cosine of 60, okay? And so we would have 1 divided by, and the cosine of 60 is 1/2. And then you could do 1 divided by 1/2 and do like a little keep, change, flip, keep the 1, change the division bar to multiplication, and then flip the 1/2 to 2 over 1. And 1 times 2 over 1 is really 1 times 2, which is 2. Okay, so sometimes you can type it in right away. Other ways, you'll have to go a different route. All right, so we'll see what happens with the next one. So again, it'd be awesome if we have a cotangent button. We would hit it, type in 150 and be finished. But we do not have a cotangent button. All right, so there's actually a couple ways we could type this in. We could type in 1 divided by tangent of 150. Okay. Or better yet, we're going to go ahead and think of this as cosine of 150 divided by the sine of 150. Okay, so we're using this right up here. Okay. This one's not going to come out to one we recognize. So what we're going to do is we're going to break up the cosine of 150. Okay. And so I'll show you if you type that in, you're not going to recognize that. All right. But if we type in cosine of 150, we're going to end up with that negative 0.866 number, which is negative square root of 3 over 2, divided by sine of 150. That's a nice easy 1.5, which is 1/2. And then we have this situation where we had earlier in this packet where you have the same denominator of 2, and they're going to cancel each other out if we did a keep, change, flip. And so we end up with the negative square root of 3 over 1, which is just negative square root of 3. And now if you type that in, that's that same decimal that we got there that we didn't recognize. Okay, but remember the directions say exact and simplest form, so that's why we had to do it this way. All right, last one. Be cool if we had a cosecant button, but we do not. All right, and what we got is an angle in radians. And I told you guys when we convert that as soon as you have an angle in radians to go ahead and convert it, okay? So 180 degrees over pi radians is equal to X amount of degrees over 3 pi divided by 4 radians. Go ahead and cross multiply. We get pi x, or x pi, equal to 180 times 3/4, which is 135 pi. Pi's will cancel, and we end up with 135 degrees. So we'll replace this with 135. All right, again, it'd be cool if we had a cosecant button in our calculator, but we don't. And so we're going to have to realize that cosecant of 135 is going to be the same thing as 1 divided by sine of 135. Okay. All right, so if we type 1 divided by sine of 135 in, this is going to give us something we don't know. All right, so we're going to go the other route and do 1 divided by. If we type in sine of 135, that's that 0.707 number, which is the square root of 2 over 2. Okay, and so now we're going to do a little keep, change, flip. We'll keep the 1. We'll change this division bar to multiplication, and we'll flip our fraction to be 2 over the square root of 2. Okay, and 1 times 2 over the square root of 2 is really just 2 over the square root of 2. Okay, except we know we don't like the radicals on the bottom, so we'll rationalize the denominator, and we end up with 2 square root of 2 on top and 2 on the bottom. And you're going to realize that if you type that in your calculator, that was that same unknown decimal that we got there. Oops, I forgot one thing, guys. These 2's will reduce, and so you actually, in simplest form, should have an answer of square root of 2. Okay. All right, let's take a look at number 2. It says, which of the following is closest to the value of secant of 52? Well, we don't have a secant button, so we can't type this into our calculator and pick our choice. However, if we remember that secant is the same thing as 1 over the cosine of 52, then we could go ahead and type that in. All right, and when we type in 1 divided by cosine of 52 in our calculator, out comes this decimal, which to the nearest hundredth would be choice 2. Number 3, which of the following values of x is not in the domain of y equals cosecant of x? All right, so we can go ahead and type in 1 divided by sine of x. all right, instead. And then we're going to just go ahead and replace our x values with our choices. So if we type in 1 divided by the sine of 180 degrees for choice 1, this is going to come out to be an error. All right, and therefore this is not in the domain. Okay, when it gives you an error. Usually this error means undefined. And the reason why it's undefined, if we think about it, on our unit circle, if we go to 180 degrees, which is over here, the coordinates of this point is -1, 0. And sine of 180, sine is the y-coordinate, and you can see that that would be 1 divided by sine of 180, which is 0, and that's how this becomes undefined. You can't divide by 0 in math. All right, and so choice 1 is our answer. Okay, you could try the other choices if you are unsure, but those should all give you not errors. All right, guys, I'll see you on the back side of notes.